Welcome to Midnight Grove, where the quiet hours hold stories of fate, memory, and the choices we can never take back. Tonight's tale, The Man Who Borrowed Time, follows Felix, a man who has always been running out of time. One evening he stumbles upon a shop that offers him what he's always wanted: extra hours, bought with memories. At first, the price seems small: a forgotten conversation, a childhood toy, an old book. But soon Felix realizes that not all memories are meaningless, and some trades take more than he ever intended to lose. So settle in, listen closely, and let this story remind you: some things once lost can never be borrowed back. Chapter 1: The Shop That Sold Time. Felix had spent his entire life running out of time. There were never enough hours in the day, never enough minutes to finish what mattered. His life was a series of unfinished tasks, missed deadlines, and conversations cut short. Always late, always behind. So when he first saw the shop, tucked between two towering buildings on a street he had never noticed before, he almost walked past it. But something made him stop. A sign in the window read, "Time traded here." Felix frowned. That didn't make sense. And yet, the door was slightly open, warm golden light spilling onto the cold pavement. A strange pull settled in his chest. Before he could second-guess himself, he stepped inside. And his life would never be the same. The shop that shouldn't exist. A soft chime rang overhead as he entered. The shop was small but impossibly deep, lined with shelves full of glass jars, each filled with swirling light. Some glowed faintly like candlelight, others pulsed with a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. Behind the wooden counter stood a man, older, dressed in a dark vest and rolled-up sleeves, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed. He looked up as Felix entered, his eyes warm yet unreadable. "Ah," he said with a knowing smile, "I look like a man who needs more time." Felix blinked. Sorry, what?" The shopkeeper gestured to the shelves. "Time, minutes, hours, days, you can trade for them here." Felix laughed, though it came out uneasy. "That's not possible." The shopkeeper simply tilted his head. "And yet you walked in." Felix hesitated, because yes, it was impossible. But something about the shop, the air thick with the scent of old books and something electric, the way the light seemed to bend at the edges of the shelves, felt undeniably real. The price of borrowed time. Felix stepped closer to the counter. "Let's say for a second that I believe you. How does it work?" The shopkeeper's smile widened. "Simple, you trade a memory, gain an hour." Felix frowned. "A memory?" The man reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small silver vial. "In here," he explained. "You give up a memory of your choosing. It will be stored safely, and in return you receive time, extracted from moments that were wasted, lost, or never used." Felix swallowed. It was absurd, impossible. But he was already thinking about it. How much could he get for an hour? What about 2? A day? Would he even miss one small memory? The shopkeeper folded his hands. "You'd be surprised," he murmured, as if he had read Felix's thoughts. Most people don't even notice what they've lost. Felix hesitated. What kind of memories do people trade? The shopkeeper smiled. Oh, the small things mostly. A childhood birthday party, a book they once loved, a face in a crowd, the little things that slip away. Felix exhaled slowly. That didn't sound so bad. One forgotten moment in exchange for an extra hour. How many moments had he already lost to time? Would one more even matter? The first trade. Felix licked his lips. How much time can I get? The shopkeeper's smile widened. That depends on the memory. Felix's pulse quickened. He had work deadlines pressing down on him, unfinished projects, a life fraying at the edges. An extra hour, just 1 hour, could change everything. All right, he said, I want an hour. The shopkeeper nodded. And what will you trade? Felix hesitated. A childhood birthday? A song he once loved? No, something smaller. Something he wouldn't miss. He closed his eyes, reaching into the hazy depths of his mind, searching for something unimportant. And then a memory surfaced. A conversation in a coffee shop. Years ago, a stranger sitting across from him. A friend, a co-worker? He couldn't quite recall. The words were distant, muffled. Something about an old movie, a book recommendation, laughter over a bad joke. It was nothing. It was meaningless. Perfect. I'll trade a conversation, Felix said. The shopkeeper nodded, setting the silver vial between them. Then all you must do is sign. Felix frowned as a piece of parchment appeared on the counter. The words shifted faintly, as if the ink had just settled. Felix leaned forward. The contract was short. A simple agreement, one memory freely given in exchange for 1 hour of time. At the bottom, a space for his signature. Felix hesitated. A strange pressure settled over him, like the weight of something unseen pressing at the edges of the room. But it was just a conversation, something small, unimportant. He picked up the pen, and he signed, an hour that wasn't his. The moment the ink dried, the silver vial glowed softly. The memory was gone. Felix blinked. For a moment he felt off balance, slightly disoriented, as if something had shifted in his mind. But when he reached for the memory, for the faint thread of that long-ago conversation, it was empty space, like reaching for something that had never existed. The shopkeeper smiled. Your time as promised. He reached beneath the counter and retrieved a small golden pocket watch. Felix watched mesmerized as the shopkeeper turned the dial backward. Once, twice, and the hands moved. Felix felt a sharp jolt in his chest. The air around him hummed, and suddenly he knew he had more time. The shopkeeper slid the watch across the counter. Use it wisely. Felix picked it up with shaking hands, and he walked out of the shop, stepping back into the night. 1 hour richer, and one memory poorer. Chapter 2. The Cost of Borrowed Time. Felix stepped onto the street, the pocket watch clutched in his hand. The air outside felt sharper, crisper. He took a slow breath, adjusting to the extra hour now pulsing through his veins. It was strange. Time didn't feel different, and yet, for the first time in years, he wasn't racing against it. He checked his phone, 11:07 p.m. He should have been exhausted. He had been running on fumes for weeks. But now he felt clear, awake, as if time had stretched just a little wider, giving him room to breathe. Felix exhaled, glancing back at the shop. The sign still hung in the window. Time traded here. A part of him wanted to go back inside, just to see how much more he could get. But instead he forced himself to walk away. This was enough. For now. A forgotten friend. The next morning Felix arrived at work early. For the first time in years, he wasn't scrambling into the office 5 minutes late, coffee in one hand, stress tightening his chest. He had time. Time to think, time to breathe, time to actually exist instead of just trying to catch up. And it was addicting. But then, something happened. A co-worker, Claire, passed his desk and paused. "Hey," she said, smiling. "I was just thinking about that coffee shop we used to go to. The one on Park Street. Haven't been there in forever." Felix blinked. He had no idea what she was talking about. Claire's smile faltered. "You remember, right? The place we always met up after work?" Felix forced a chuckle. "Yeah, of course," he lied. But the moment she walked away, a cold weight settled in his chest. Because he didn't remember. He had no memory of sitting in a coffee shop with Claire. No memory of conversations, of laughter, of the time spent there. And deep down, he knew why. Another trade. That night, Felix returned to the shop. The golden sign still gleamed in the window. The door was still unlocked. Inside, the shopkeeper greeted him with the same calm, expectant smile. "I was wondering when you'd return," he said. Felix hesitated. "So you remember me?" "Of course." The shopkeeper gestured to the shelves. "And I see that you remember me, too." Felix's grip tightened. "I want another hour." The shopkeeper nodded. "As always, the price is a memory." Felix swallowed. He told himself it was fine. One minor memory in exchange for another hour. What was one more forgotten moment? The silver vial appeared on the counter. Felix closed his eyes, reached into his mind, and let something go. The hours add up. Felix returned to the shop again, and again, and again. At first it was small things. A childhood toy, a book he once loved, the sound of an old song. But soon, the memories had to be bigger. An old teacher's name, the way his grandmother smelled like vanilla and lavender, a vacation he barely recalled. But what did it matter? In exchange, he gained hours. He was always on time, always focused, always ahead. But something had changed. The hours add up. Felix returned to the shop again, and again, and again. At first it was small things. A childhood toy, a book he once loved, the sound of an old song. But soon, the memories had to be bigger. An old teacher's name, the way his grandmother smelled like vanilla and lavender, a vacation he barely recalled. But what did it matter? In exchange, he gained hours. He was always on time, always focused, always ahead. But something had changed. The memory he didn't mean to lose. Felix lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since he had started trading memories, a new thought entered his mind. What if I traded something important? Something I can't get back? Felix squeezed his eyes shut. He had to know. A dangerous question. He returned to the shop just before midnight. The shopkeeper was waiting. Felix stepped forward, his voice sharper than before. What have I lost? The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow. You already know. Felix's hands clenched. I don't. The shopkeeper studied him carefully. Then, with a sigh, he gestured toward a door in the back of the shop. Felix hesitated. He had never noticed that door before. He swallowed hard, and he stepped through. The room of forgotten things. The air inside was thick and heavy. The room was lined with shelves upon shelves of silver vials. Each one glowed faintly, memories stored away. Felix's stomach twisted. Somewhere in this room his memories were trapped. He scanned the shelves, looking for something, anything that felt familiar. Then his breath caught, because there among the vials was one labeled with a name he didn't recognize. Her name. The person he erased. Felix's pulse thundered in his ears. The name on the vial, it wasn't a place or a song or a conversation. It was a person, someone he had known, someone he had cared about. Felix's hands shook as he reached for the vial. And suddenly, a memory surfaced. A park bench, laughter on a cold winter evening, a hand holding his, a voice whispering, "You never slow down long enough to just be with someone, do you?" A promise. "I'll try." Felix staggered back, breath coming in short gasps, because he knew. He had loved her. And now she was gone, not dead, not missing, but erased, because he had traded her away. For an extra hour, the final choice. Felix turned to the shopkeeper, horror clawing at his chest. "How do I get it back?" The shopkeeper's eyes softened. "You don't." Felix's breath hitched. "But time moves forward," the shopkeeper murmured, "and so must you." Felix's pulse roared in his ears, because for the first time in his life, he had all the time he had ever wanted, and yet he had never felt emptier. The man who borrowed time and lost himself. Felix stumbled from the shop. The golden sign still gleamed in the window. The door was still unlocked. But now he knew the truth. Not all time is worth having, and some things once lost can never be borrowed back. Thank you for joining us at Midnight Grove for The Man Who Borrowed Time. Felix thought he was trading moments that no longer mattered, but time has a way of revealing the truth too late. Some losses go unnoticed. Others leave an emptiness we cannot name. As you drift into sleep, may you hold on to the things that truly matter. The faces, the laughter, the fleeting moments that shape who you are. Because in the end, time is not measured in hours, but in the memories we keep. Sleep well, and we'll see you next time for another story.